As Unitarian Universalists, we have a mission to search for truth and to serve our community. We organize these forums as a service to our community to support personal reflection, social action, and encourage individual and collective growth for those who attend. We hope to challenge you with new information and perspectives on the issues that you'll end with these issues here and continue to think about them and perhaps even act on them. Today's topic is Muslim families in northeastern Ohio. Our guest, Julia Sershan, she's the Executive Director of Council on American Islamic Relations. She has a bachelor's degree in East Asian languages from Columbia and graduate work from Ohio University in linguistics and Harvard University in Middle Eastern Studies. She's, as I say, at the Council of American Islamic Relations, which is CARE. She's been working in civil rights advocacy, educational outreach, media relations. By the way, all three of our guests today, I heard them on NPR. So I guess maybe they won't be on NPR anymore because they get recruited for others. Julia has initiated projects to improve communication, not only in the community, but also with law enforcement. She's dedicated to social justice. She's serves with the Islamic Council of Ohio. And she's on the steering committee of We Believe Ohio, which is a statewide interfaith group. She's also the chair of Battered Immigrant Women, and it's a subcommittee of Cuyahoga County, by the way. She's the board of Al-Ahsan, which is Islamic school. It's the only full-time school in northeastern Ohio. If I'm going across the table, Sarah Mohammed. She is the vice president of the Muslim Student Association of Cleveland State. She's the vice president of pre-dental school. So if, by the way, in about 4 or 5 years, if you need some dental work, you know, have a referral. And of course, she is a student, at, as I say, at Cleveland State, but in the College of Health Science and Professions. We have Akram Jamal. He's the president of the Islamic Center of Cleveland. Hello. He is the president of the Islamic Center of Cleveland. He's the member of the executive committee in the center. He's been that since 2013. He's a member of the board of trustees for 2 years prior to that. He is a youth leader, which we value.
Do you want this one?
Yeah.
Annie is the former vice president of the of the Muslim Student Association of Cleveland State. So, with that said, I would like our guests to start out with Julia, and we've set aside time for them to speak, but if they make it shorter, or longer, that's fine, because I think they would like to get questions for the audience. Okay? Thank you. Just in case.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Well, thank you so much for having us here today. I'm really honored to be here, and I guess we have to thank Mike McIntyre on the Sound of Ideas for bringing the three of us together. I think that program was heard around the county, so that's good. Well, it seems like your question today really is how are we coping with what's going on? So I don't really have any prepared remarks. I mean, there's a few things that I certainly want to say and that I want to convey. And I think your question is really an important one, because the Muslim community, particularly in America, really we're kind of I don't want to speak in cliches, but we're caught between I don't want to say a rock and a hard place, but let me say like a mountain and another mountain. And it feels like both mountains are coming together on top of us. Because on one hand, we have the, very challenging geopolitical problems that we're seeing all the way from, whether it's issues in Israel-Palestine, whether it's issues with Boko Haram in Nigeria, whether it's challenges in Libya, whether it's the counter-revolution in Egypt, where one dictator was overthrown and really then re-propped up by the United States and kind of brought back a new dictator in Egypt, really all the way over to Afghanistan, where there's a tremendous, what I would see as a resource war going on, because it turns out that there's about $5 trillion worth of rare earths that pilot our computers and cell phones under the ground in Afghanistan. And of course, that's become a place for competition, world competition. So there's all these geostrategic challenges that we face. And so the question is, how are we responding in America to what's the turmoil that's going on overseas? Is a big one. It's a big question to ask Muslim families in Northeast Ohio, because it doesn't look like our country can resolve those challenges, let alone Muslim families in America. But at the same time, the burden is on us to explain to the wider public, what is happening, what is ISIS? Why do we have extremism? What is all this violence about? And I think sometimes Muslim families want to just say, look, we have nothing to do with that. We're just individual Americans, just like the rest of you, and we can't solve or resolve those issues too. So I think one of the challenges that we're facing in America as Muslim Americans is that we are scapegoated or blamed for the actions of individuals who carry out acts in our name. And someone in the audience said I should kind of just tell it like it is, so I guess I will tell it like it is. I see someone in the audience that maybe give me a little courage to say this, but the important thing to understand about the Muslim community is we're mainly a people of color, okay? And people of color are how should I say that? They're often, in the white supremacist context, people of color are collectively guilty for the actions of individuals in their community. And we see the same thing going on with the Muslim community, that we are being blamed for the actions of some people in our community. So it's a kind of collective guilt, it's a kind of collective view of our community rather than seeing us as individuals. And so it's important to say that. Now, there is a lot of pressure on our people right now, because it seems that every time there's an election in this country, our community is placed under extra scrutiny. So we've seen this before in a number of elections where there's a lot of fear generated, because fear often, I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't genuine things to be afraid of. There's certainly some genuine challenges that we're facing. I mean, for example, we saw with the San Bernardino, of course, as we know, since 9/11, this has been the problem of terrorism in the world is a serious problem. The problem of what's happening in France and Belgium, those are serious challenges. But what's happening is that those issues, those legitimate fears, are being conflated with other things. So, for example, the 51 million refugees that have abandoned and had to leave their homes, and that's more refugees traveling on the planet now than any time since World War II. And what's unfortunately happened is when the problems happened in Belgium and in France, people tried to start to say that that was the responsibility of the refugees, and the refugees were the people that we have to be afraid of, when actually the issues in Europe with radicalization of some people in those communities there has more to do, I think, with the socioeconomic issues related to Muslims in Europe, where they've been, and this is not to excuse what's happening, but more to explain it, whereas Muslims in America are much more integrated into the fabric of American life, that they've, we've prospered here, we're part of the tapestry and the fabric of American diversity. In Europe, the more of the immigrants that came from the Muslim world to Europe were more in the, I don't want to say lower socioeconomic classes, but they were more in the socioeconomic classes that had a lot of challenges and were pretty much ghettoized in many European communities and faced a lot of discrimination and could not integrate as well into European society. And then when the wars happened, of course, there was this kind of hostility and feeling of not really belonging in either arena. Now, we don't have that challenge in America as Muslims. We're very well integrated into the fabric of American life. We are a very well educated community, generally speaking. We have higher than average incomes, generally speaking. We vote in high numbers and very much participate in the fabric of American life. So had it not been for 9/11, most Americans probably wouldn't even recognize that we're here, except maybe you have a Muslim doctor or physician or dentist, but really didn't know we were here. Okay, so I only have 1 minute left, and I only got about halfway through my topic, but that's okay. So what I guess I want to say is that the Muslim community in America certainly is under pressure. We are constantly asked to explain, what is happening overseas, when those are very, very complex questions, probably that the average person would find difficult to explain. I guess the other thing I want to say, and that I want you to know about, is that although there are individual hate crimes against our community, for example, we had the mosque in Toledo that was set on fire, the landmark mosque in Toledo several years ago, where someone brought a can of gasoline in and tried to start a fire in the sanctuary, and it did $1.5 million worth of damage. All the sprinklers came on and ruined the entire school and all the school books, and they've recovered from that. We've had shootings. We've had, since San Bernardino, 70 mosques have been attacked in this country. Most people wouldn't know that. While we have these hate crimes being perpetrated against our community here, my bigger concern is really the government policies that have been put in place that I believe actually give license to individuals to carry out hate crimes and acts of discrimination. So, for example, we have the watch listing. We have the secondary screening at the airport that stigmatizes the Muslim community. We have the warrantless wiretapping, which impacts really all Americans. But these kinds of policies, whether it's Guantanamo to warrantless wiretapping, those policies, I believe, give license to people to ascribe collective guilt to the Muslim community. And I think that it's very dangerous to do that, because we've seen what happens when a small group of people are blamed for all the woes and troubles that are happening in the world. We've seen that in Europe and what happened from that. And there is a danger of scapegoating a small group. I mean, we see that happening right now with the immigrant, the Hispanic and Latino immigrants who have nothing to do with 9/11, but are being deported at a ferocious pace. So I guess what I would say is, get to know our community better, get to see that we're individuals just like everyone else, and that we should not scapegoat or stereotype people from our community. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I hope in the Q&A I'll get to talk a little bit more, particularly about some of the legislation that is being passed around the country against the Muslim community, including a bill that's in Ohio right now called House Bill 339. If I have more chance to explain that to you, I would be glad to do that. Okay, I think I've used up all my time, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Mohammed from the Muslim Students Association.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I think that this is such a crucial, topic to be discussing, and I'm so happy to be here to discuss it with you all. So I want to address this in kind of two ways, and basically how everyone's dealing with this politically and how people are dealing with this socially. So as we can see, with the upcoming elections, a lot of these presidential candidates are using this anti-Islamic rhetoric and instilling fear into the community as a sense of, I guess you can say, benefit to themselves, because they know that a lot of people are uneducated about our faith, and therefore they're taking advantage of it and putting it in a sense of, well, these people are people of danger and people of fear, you must fear them, come with me. And it's sad, but a lot of people are not necessarily taking the initiative to learn about Islam. And thankfully, as the vice president of the Muslim Student Association at Cleveland State University, we've held many events where we create a more open and welcoming atmosphere for people of all faiths. I've spoken to many people of different faiths, including Christianity and Judaism, Hinduism, and even people who are atheists. And we always discuss a lot of the same principles about, what is jihad, what is Sharia. All of these words are always thrown into the news, and you're kind of just like, well, what are we really discussing here? And so I just wanted to talk about a few of the events we did and a little bit about what the Muslim community as a family, like how parents are educating their children on how to deal with these issues. So we held an event called Hijab Day, where we gave women the ability to make a pledge to wear the scarf for the whole day. And many non-Muslim women made the initiative to do so, and it really opened the platform for questions and answers, and it really gets into like, okay, let's understand a little bit about Christianity. There was the Mother Mary who wore the veil. Why are we looking at this in such of a foreign way? And so I was so happy with all the participants we had and all the questions, and I think as long as we continue to make these types of initiatives in our community, then we will continue to open the platform for questions, and I think that's what's most important, because as long as we stay secluded, then these problems are going to continue to arise. If we look more towards the families, living here in the United States, specifically the Muslim families, they come from many different cultural backgrounds. So first and foremost, we have to make sure we can distinguish between cultural practices and religious practices. I have many Indian Muslim friends that have different cultural practices than I do as a Palestinian. And so I think a lot of the issues that children are dealing with these days are children are taking what they hear at home into the school setting. And they're listening to what their parents are saying, whether their parents are saying, oh, look at these Muslims, look what they're doing, they're causing violence. And children don't know better. They take that information back to the school setting and really put the Muslim, children that are in that school as well into very uncomfortable situations. And so parents are really opening up to their children and saying, look, if this type of incident happens, obviously in an elementary school setting where we've seen many incidents happen, address your teacher, tell them this is something that's wrong, address your teacher. As an adult, for instance, more in like a high school setting or a college setting, we normally push to engage in Q&A, and we normally push to, engage in more of a comfortable atmosphere for people to really want to ask questions. And I'm more than happy to ask questions, answer any of the individuals' questions they may have. I want to talk about an event we also had last week. We had an individual, she's a political activist. Her name is Linda Sarsour. She came to our community in Cleveland at Cleveland State University and discussed, how us as Muslims should be dealing with, all of this anti-Islamic rhetoric. And she made such a beautiful point, and that is that it's so important to reach out to our community, that we can't sit at home and say, why are we so divided? Why are we not standing together? We have to make the initiative to go out to our community, within the Latino community, within the African American community, within, all different races. And it's important because we're all struggling with the same issues as minorities, dealing with, racism and discrimination. And as long as we continue to seclude ourselves, we will never really reach that state of, I guess you can say, true peace and true tranquility. Something else I wanted to include was an event we had, which was called Islam Awareness Week. So every day of the week, we held, and this is at Cleveland State University, every day of the week we held a different event. And the first day was just, what is Islam? So we had different booths. Who is Jesus in Islam? Why do women wear veil in Islam? And we kind of we had a little table, everyone engaged in discussion. And the second day was an interfaith dialogue, which is one of my favorite events we do in the whole year, because it takes, it's that one time where we can really forget about the differences within our faith and focus on the similarities. And obviously we're all, Abrahamic faith, so we brought in a rabbi, and we brought in a pastor, and we brought in an imam. And it was so beautiful because we all discussing, the love and the purpose and the meaning behind the story about, the prophet Abraham, peace be upon him. And this is definitely an event I highly encourage people to kind of engage in, is in this interfaith dialogue, because this is a type of event that creates more unity within our community. Third of all, we did have an Islamophobia event. So we brought an individual from CARE, Brother Isam, who discussed, what the issues, the reality of Islamophobia in our nation. And, unfortunately, we've been putting in these situations multiple times, but thankfully he was able to give us advice and understanding that, okay, if an individual was to approach you in a very aggressive and inappropriate manner, by all means, the last thing you want to do is approach him in that same way. Especially the teachings of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. A lot of people, approached him in a very aggressive manner, and he reacted in a very calm and patient manner and kind of took a step back and understood, okay, what exactly is the problem? How would you like me to address this? And this is kind of the teachings that, Brother Isam taught us when he came to our university, is that if you're ever in a situation where someone is coming up to you and attacking you, go back to your country, you don't belong here, you don't do this, say, excuse me, sir, have you learned about Islam? What do you know about Islam? I'm here to answer your questions. And it's really just creating that comfortable and open atmosphere. And I think this is something we really stress within our members in the university, the members of the Muslim Student Association, is being approachable. These types of things are so important, because if you tend to seclude yourself, then from a distance, they're going to kind of say, wow, that individual, they must be supporting all of these, violent organizations. This is not an individual that's approachable. Like, I can't even talk to him. But for instance, even if it is like, talking to someone on the bus, even if it's, running into somebody, oh, how was your day? How are you? These types of things are so important to kind of break those walls and kind of open the platform for questions. The third day that we had was why Islam. So we had people who converted to Islam explain, why they decided to choose Islam. And I thought this was great because we had a lot of non-Muslim participants ask very beautiful questions. And I thought that really kind of opened a lot of people's minds and, understood that, okay, it's important to respect one another's faiths. If you expect someone to respect your faith, then it's something that should be done in return. And the last day was probably the most enjoyable day, which we did an ice cream social during our, free ice cream. So Friday we had a ice cream social after Friday prayer. So each individual that attends Friday prayer, we ask them to bring a non-Muslim friend with them. And we had Imam Ramiz from our community talk about the character of a Muslim. And it was beautiful because we had so many non-Muslims. We all talked and we all engaged, and then we all had free ice cream. I don't know what's better than that. So this was definitely something that was really enjoyable. And I think if we continue to strive to allow our community to be more unified and to be more of an accepting and loving community, then this is how we will achieve peace. And like, Sister Julia said, we can no longer victimize ourselves. We can no longer take the blame for the actions of others. And this is something that we really need to be cautious about, is we can't keep pointing fingers. Obviously, we have to take the initiative to learn more about the other faiths. And, I'm happy that I was able to have the opportunity to take a religious studies course at my university, because it opened up the platform for questions, and it teaches us not to be very, ignorant about others' faiths. And one of the most beautiful things about this nation, as an American, I'm so proud that we live in a nation that is so diverse. This is probably one of the beautiful things, because when I walk into my university, I can't tell you how ignorant I was as a high school student, because I didn't know much. But when I stepped into my university, I met people from all religious backgrounds and from all cultural backgrounds. And I think this is a way to really achieve a more unified and accepting community. Thank you.
Morning. They're very great speakers. I don't think I'm close to what they're saying, but I concur with everything they do say. I wanted to start with my own family experience, as this is Muslim families in America. My parents came from a refugee camp in West Bank. They came here. My mother was young. She was 6 years old, with her father that he opened up his own store. He was a merchant here in Painesville in the east side. My father came in his mid-20s, and both of my family sides came for two obvious reasons, and I think everybody comes for the same reasons when they do come to America. It's freedom and opportunity. The opportunity to start a life that you want to better for your family, as well as the freedom that you can practice your own religion. And this is what the country was based off of. So when people come and they say, well, we have to watch them at their mosques and we have to see, you're more than welcome to come to the mosque. We have actually, we open our arms to anyone that wants to come. We have free tours. We have Tuesday night classes. You're more than welcome, 7 p.m. It's a Discover Islam class if you have any questions every week. These types of things are something that it's somewhat of a good advertisement for the mosques in a way, because you're saying, oh, go see the mosque. Well, come on in. You'll see the mosque. You'll see everyone's very friendly. These things that happen with others are lone wolves, as they call them in the media. These aren't people that come to the mosque. These are people that have been brainwashed or radicalized online. They've never attended a mosque. They take an oath to these people, and they have nothing to do with coming to mosques. So when you come to a mosque, you actually see friendly faces and people that want to share their stories with you as well. So that's what we always say. We encourage everyone to come to the mosques. We do a lot of the outreach, the youth outreach, All Faiths Pantry. We deliver groceries to the senior citizens that cannot leave their houses. We also have Cleveland Food Bank will be starting next week a distribution center at the mosques for anyone that would like any groceries or vegetables, fruits. We have those based at the mosque. We encourage others to attend the mosque, as I said, and the best, as our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, told us, the best of you are those who have good manners to others. And that's what we try to show, and we try to encourage others as well, especially with the youth. And I want to give you just one posting that was on Facebook from one of the youth members of the mosque. He says, I was studying outside at Panera Bread and went to pray the afternoon prayer. Some guy was walking in and yelled at me to go back to my country. I finished my prayer and went in. I ordered 2 cookies and 2 cups of coffee and asked the cashier to have it delivered to the man and the lady he was with. But I asked the cashier to tell them it was from me and give him the receipt that I wrote on. This is my country as much as it is yours. I'm sorry you have a bad impression of Muslims, though. Most of us are friendly people. Enjoy the cookies and have a good rest of your day. Islam is a religion of peace, so I thought a peaceful response was best. These are the youth that come from the mosques. They don't have extreme radical views. They understand that the manners, the good manners that we show to our neighbors and to others is what's going to show what a real Muslim is. And I'm going to end with that, and I'm looking forward to answering any other questions. Thank you.
Before we get in the question and answer session, I want to comment, because after listening to our speakers, my personal physician is from Syria. And on 9/11, after 9/11, his staff draped American flags all over the lobby, in the hallway, and I felt bad, because why should he have to be subjected to any kind of discrimination, or his staff? But now we get down to the administrative things. We're passing around a clipboard if anyone would like to be notified of upcoming forums. We'll be passing around microphones for people to ask questions, so please speak into the, please speak into the microphone directly. And the person that's holding the microphone will select the person that's asking the will be asking the question. Okay? Okay.
Well, if nobody has a question to start, I'm sorry.
So, you know, the Boston Marathon bombers grew up in the United States and were educated at local colleges. How did they escape the kind of benign influence that you talk about there? What went wrong there?
I guess I would, in a certain sense, I would say I don't know, but I would turn that back. How did Timothy McVeigh escape the benign influence of Christianity in America? I mean, it's the same kind of question. I think that there are always people who will commit violence. From what I understand, the older brother, he was somehow radicalized. It's not clear how he was. But what's strange and actually very worrying about the Boston Marathon bomber is that there were people within the United States national security apparatus that were warned about him from overseas. And they actually had people who had interviewed and talked to the older brother, and it looks like there might have been some kind of informant or somebody who was actually more closely engaged. So my question back to you or to the audience would be, how did that happen? Now, law enforcement will say, well, we can't watch everybody and we can't scrutinize everybody. But I would argue that because we've made the haystack so big by putting many, many innocent people on these kinds of watch lists and having this kind of, Rolodex of, I don't know how many million people are on it, that we actually are not able to much more carefully watch people who may be a true threat. So I think that there's some serious challenges to the way law enforcement is actually monitoring these threats. And I think stigmatizing a whole community actually more endangers the country, because then you don't have as many allies in the community that could, potentially come forward and report things. So he was on their radar. I think they could have done a better job at that, frankly. So that will be kind of my answer to that.
I just wanted to add a short comment to that, and that is, normally when people of the, I guess you could say, Muslim community do some form of violence, like we were stating from before, the whole faith itself is being blamed for that action. But in a sense, there was an individual who did shoot up a church and killed many, African Americans, and it was not like, okay, why did this person had not educated himself about Christianity, although he did express, that he was a man of faith. So it is tough to put ourselves in this situation, but what we do have to always understand is to avoid associating, any form of faith, whether it's Christianity or Islam or Judaism, with any form of violence, because in a personal belief, I believe that no faith expresses these types of actions, and that any individual who does engage in these types of engage in these types of actions are either A, misinterpreting the faith, or B, not following it at all. So that's my comment. Okay, thank you.
Another comment about a physician relationship. I have a cardiologist that comes from Lebanon, and he was speaking of some of the problems that they have there. There are 2 million people living in Lebanon of citizens. They have another million people that are refugees, most of them from Israel. And he said that it's a powder keg ready to happen. He says that a lot of radicalization could happen there because they don't have the educational opportunities and things of that nature. So, you know, this is not isolated to the United States. This is worldwide problems.
We have a question here.
I wanted to know from any of our panelists if there are a significant number of refugee families from some of those geopolitical conflicts being settled in Northeast Ohio, and if so, are there ways for people to help or partner with the local mosques in assisting them?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's there are families here in this region, and there's a number of organizations that deal more directly with the refugees, and that would be the Us Together, which you can find out online. Danielle Drake is the outreach person, and we're connected with her, with what they do. They are bringing refugees from those areas. I know they have some from Iraq, for example, and I believe from Afghanistan, and they will be getting some from Syria, although I think the Syrian settlement numbers are smaller. I think there's less than a couple dozen Syrian families that have been settled in Ohio, but if everything goes smoothly, there will be more. There's more, I think, in Toledo and Franklin County than in Cuyahoga County in terms of the Syrian families. The other major group that brings in refugees is Catholic Charities. And I know both groups, and I know, for example, Us Together, they have they work to form this refugee consortium in northeastern Ohio, which is a really amazing collaborative, and they're taking volunteers to help with whether it's teaching English or donating clothing or furniture, and you can also find that information through Danielle Drake. That's probably the best way to connect with the needs of the refugees locally. Now, one thing that you could do to take some positive action would be to write to the governor of Ohio, because unfortunately when the incident happened in Paris, then when people learned that they were trying to bring Syrian families here to America, about 32 or plus governors of the United States said, we don't want those people in our, and I say those people, we don't want those people settling in our state. And unfortunately, Governor Kasich also said we don't want them in Ohio. Now, we wrote him a letter, and we had 50 members of the interfaith and Muslim communities, clergy leaders from around the Northeast Ohio, write back to him, and we wrote him a very beautiful letter. And I know he read the letter because he sent the director of the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, Cynthia Dungy. She runs a $3.3 billion, the Medicare program in Ohio. And he sent her up to our office, and she said, the governor read your letter. And I think that the governor, when he heard how hurtful it was, to think that, like, right now the Mediterranean Sea is like a grave. I mean, there are people, hundreds of people drowning, including women and children, washing up on the beaches in Greece. To say that we don't want them in Ohio because we're afraid of them committing terrorist acts, you can never be 100% safe, and I think if you did, we would live in a country that is a kind of lockdown type country. We wouldn't want to live here if we made that kind of country. So I think it was a kind of political move, and I said, while it's politically expedient, what you said will not stand up to the scrutiny of history, and it will be a shameful mark on the people of Ohio. So I would encourage everybody to write to the governor, couple short notes, and say, look, we would like those desperate families, because no one leaves their home unless they're in absolute desperation. So there are ways to help the refugee families in Northeast Ohio. And if you wanted to take that on as a church project, I would talk to us together or Catholic Charities and see, that refugee collaborative to see what you could do, because there's a lot you could do.
I also wanted to mention that through an organization called Give, we have a hot meal program. And I think it's the last Sunday of every month, we have a specific, I guess you could say, theme. And actually today, right after this forum, I'll be heading over there. And the forum is like the form of the summer theme. So we're going to bring flip-flops and, short skirts and tank tops for the kids. And kind of, if we want to bring, toys and stuff like that for the summer. And we do this at the last Sunday of every month, and I think this is a great way that people of all faiths can come together for the same purpose, and this is to really aid the refugees within our community. A lot of them are Somali and Iraqi. We don't have many Syrian, like Sister Julia said, and I think it is sad because these individuals are searching for a safe haven. We're consistently placing this type of fear and kind of allowing the communities here to say, don't welcome them here. They'll bring violence and they'll bring hate. And it's really like these are women and children who are trying to escape terrorism and trying to, have witnessed so much. A lot of the children, I just read a statistic yesterday that 1 in 3 of the children of Syria have lived their whole lives exposed to war. And I think this is something so crucial to their development, both psychologically and emotionally. And I think it's sad that people always bring up the aspect of a financial issue when that should not be the issue at all. If we're willing to spend over $1 trillion on war, why can't we spend a few, million aiding refugees within our community? So that's definitely something to think about. If anybody's interested in participating in this hot meal program, some of the refugees are Christian, some of them are Muslim. It's like I said, the people who volunteer, it's a very diverse group of people, and the people we serve are very diverse as well. Thank you. The Bet Hanina Social Club. If you'd like, I can give you the address when we're done. Thank you.
Thank you for a very insightful presentation. I've learned a lot already this morning. A question I have, both in terms of our local mosques and the student organization, the Christian churches tend to be of a wide variety of preferences, Presbyterian, Lutheran, etc. And they might make jokes about each other, but they're never at war with each other. It does seem the two branches of Islam are sometimes at war with each other, the war between Iran and Iraq a few years ago, etc. Are our mosques serving both branches of Islam is one question I have. And does the student organization, does it deal with this issue between the two major faiths within Islam? Thank you.
Yes, the question is if both branches, the Shia and the Sunni, if they are at war in America. In our mosque, and actually all mosques in America, I think everyone has an understanding, and they understand that there's adversity between both sects. And our mosque, we do not discriminate against another. We have members of the Shia community that are part of the mosque, as well as it's a majority Sunni mosque, but we do have a minor group that are Shia, and we're open to all branches of the Islam. I think Sister Julia can talk more about that around.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and thankfully this is definitely not an issue that we deal with. We do have people of our individuals within our organization who consider themselves Shia, but we pray next to each other. We have activities with one another. I'm so glad, one of my best friends is Shia, so I'm Sunni, and it's so important to understand that the differences between these two sects had not initially be like this whole separate idea of Islam itself. It really kind of started off as more of a political division during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It was more about who's going to take control after the death of the Prophet. Who's going to be the in charge. And I think that was where the separation started. So I think it's important to understand that there isn't this huge difference between Shia and Sunni. I think it's kind of developed that way. But if you really indulge and you really study, it's literally one difference. There's one difference if you really study in depth. But definitely, this is not an issue we deal with. Thankfully, we have Friday prayer at the university, and we have people within the Shia community and Sunni community who pray amongst one another. We have the same beliefs in regards to, the Quran. We both read the same holy book. It's not like we read a different holy book. I definitely think that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that.
Yeah, I would just add very quickly, too, I think some of the, unfortunately, some of the religious differences, those have been exploited, and I think that the situation is definitely getting worse. I think, for example, the Iran-Iraq war, instead of looking at that really as a religious war between Sunni and Shia, I think that that can be better looked at more. I mean, these issues are complicated, so we don't want to oversimplify it. But that really, in a certain sense, was a proxy war between the superpowers, right? Because on one hand, the United States was supporting Saddam Hussein, and actually, when we talk about Assad using gas against his people, I mean, it's well known, it was well documented in the New York Times that the United States of America was giving the Saddam Hussein the actual locations of the Iranian troops so that the Iraqis could then use gas against them. I mean, so, this is very complicated. The European powers supplied the chemicals that made some of the gas used in that war. I mean, in a certain sense, the Russians were supporting the Iranians and the Americans were supporting the Iraqis, and in many ways it was a proxy war, again, over resources. What we see happening right now in Saudi Arabia, between Saudi Arabia and Iran, is another example of, there are some existing political differences, to be certain, and there are some existing religious differences, but now what we've got is weapons manufacturers, selling cluster bombs to the Saudis, who are then using it in Yemen because of, the strife in Yemen, and now that's turning into, it's more and more looking like religious wars. And when you really get to the bottom of these things, religion plays a part in it, but there's a lot more going on. I mean, with Assad, for example, Assad comes from the Alawite group, which is a small subsection of the Shia faith. We've now turned, and I had traveled to Syria, and you would see people from all different groups, mingling together in the markets, and there was not this, religious conflict. Well, now we've turned that into somewhat of a religious conflict. In Iraq, for thousands of years, Sunni and Shia were intermarrying. Next thing you know, we've got that turned. Once the American invasion happened, and we tipped the balance between Sunni and Shia. That's why. How should I say it? When outside powers engage in the Middle East, which is a very complex part of the world, we often don't make things better. I mean, I don't know the answer. I think, we've got some serious problems. As somebody said, well, there was a Middle East expert that came on television and they introduced him as a Middle East expert. Well, nobody seems to be able to be an expert on the Middle East, right? I mean, it's really complicated.
Thank you.
Question, when attacks occur in San Bernardino or Boston or a massive one in Paris, and the assumption or accusations are made, well, they couldn't have been operating in a vacuum. There must have been peaceful Muslims who knew these guys, who could have blown the whistle on them before they attacked. And why isn't the peaceful Muslim community policing its own? And is that really a realistic expectation to have to turn in radical elements before terrorist attacks begin and attacks on stadiums occur? Is it realistic?
I don't know about the peaceful Muslims knowing about these radicalized Muslims. I know when the San Bernardino attack happened, the Imam had said he hasn't seen him in 2 years attend the mosque. So they're not attending the mosque and saying, oh, we have to do something against America. These people are radicalized in their own selves if they're online and they have some type of brainwashing from a forum that they see. But mosques in general, you wouldn't see this coming out of a mosque. I'll say one story. I know there was a documentary called Informants. It's a Al Jazeera documentary about mosques and radicalized, basically they're agents that try to get people to do something at a mosque. And these informants will go to the mosques and they will say something and try to get them to act on it. So they're entrapping them. It's an entrapment. There was one time that a mosque actually called the FBI and said, "Hey, this guy is telling us to do things," and it turned out that it was an agent from the FBI. And it was big news. I think it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago in California. So even in the MSA as well in California, they were trying to entrap them to do something. And these, as Muslims, we, like we say, we practice peace. So when they see this, of course we're gonna, and as president of the mosque, anything that we see as a president, I have to tell the law enforcement right away. I have to call FBI if I see any type of extremism. I have to tell them about it. It's my duty as a Muslim to let others know as well.
Okay, next question is here.
I'm curious about the relationship between the Muslim community from Middle East and Asia and the expanding African American Muslim community.
I think that's a beautiful question because especially at Cleveland State University, we do have a lot of African American individuals that are part of our organization. I think it's something too important because a lot of people don't know that 1/3 of the Muslim population within the United States is from the African American community. I definitely think it's so important that we do initiate with these types of acts, making everyone from all cultural backgrounds feel comfortable. And I'm happy to say that I do have individuals that are I'm really good friends with people from Kenya and from all different types of areas. And I think it's so important that we continue to make the community more accepting, people of all cultures. But that is definitely, I don't think it's really like an issue. I mean, we do have a lot of people who participate in our activities, attend our meetings. I mean, we have elections coming up, and that's pretty crazy. So, I mean, we do have a lot of participants, and I'm happy to say it's a very diverse atmosphere.
I would just add briefly to that there are, I think, 14 mosques, maybe more, in the greater Cleveland area, and there are a number of them that are, very, very diverse. But we're also very, all of them are very diverse. One of the oldest mosques in America, in Ohio, is the First Cleveland Mosque, which is in an old Polish social hall over on East 130th. It's been there for quite some time. And that is led by Imam Abbas Ahmed. His grandfather was a very famous imam locally. And so it has a very storied history. And Imam Abbas is actually a chaplain for the Cleveland Division of Police. But if you ever want to know more about the African American Muslim community in Cleveland, they have a very, very rich history. And there's 6, 7 mosques that are majority African American, and they have rich cultural traditions and, amazing family values, and they contribute so much to the Muslim community of Greater Cleveland. They serve on the boards, and they've really helped ground the current civil rights struggle that the Muslim American community is facing, because they are really seasoned in how to stand up for their rights. So that's been very important for the more newly arrived Muslim community. When we have our annual Sharing Ramadan Iftar, it's like the largest iftar in Ohio. It's our Breaking the Fast. When you go there, you'll see just tremendous diversity. And the African American Muslim community is very, very important to the Greater Cleveland Muslim community.
Thank you.
This may come out a little garbled, but I'll try hard. I really appreciate your comments, all three of you, but I'm also a bit concerned about some of our questions. That there is so much we need to learn, and I'm a little afraid that maybe I'm imagining this, but I hope that people here in the audience are not seeing you as defensive and seeing more about how much we need to learn. Like the question that was well intended about the war between Sunnis and Shiites. Just that language of war between two sects, you could say that of Protestants and Catholics, or Democrats and Republicans. Sometimes it's earned. But I think we need to be terribly careful about the way we think, the way we speak, and our ability to listen very, very carefully to such well-informed people. I've known Julia for years. I adore her. And it's incumbent on us to change ourselves to be better citizens along with them. So I know that's not a question, it's not my usual style, but it worries me a bit.
You know, I'm really glad that we have this wonderful, safe space with a friendly audience, and you can ask anything that's on your mind. I think that the Muslim community, we do tend to be seen these days through the national security lens. So, I mean, that's not the only lens in which we should be looked at, and we're trying to challenge that, and that's why we're having that this morning. I think the question about Sunni Shia, it always comes up, and we're used to that, so no problem. There's a really good article by the speaker who's coming to our annual banquet. His name is Murtaza Hussain, and he has written about this. Is there really a 1400-year dispute between Sunni and Shia? And he writes really well about that question. So I encourage you to look at his articles. He's at The Intercept, which is the online journal which Glenn Greenwald started. Some of you probably know Glenn Greenwald. He met a famous man in Hong Kong. Does anybody? Edward Snowden. So we're bringing somebody from that paper who happens to be, it's an online journal, who happens to be Muslim, and he writes about many, many of the issues, including the Sunni-Shia split, and I learned a lot from reading his article too. So I'm going to pass the mic if there's anybody else who wants to respond to that.
I just wanted to make one quick comment, and I think basically what I usually look for is your intention. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions anybody may have. And if you intend, and it's all based on your intention. So sometimes it's not really worded in the best way, but please understand that I don't take it on offense. I don't want to speak on anybody else's behalf, but I don't take it in offense. So it's basically like if you're approaching me in a very rude and offensive manner, obviously I'm not going to react in that same way, but that is going to be a bit offensive. But if I know that you are an individual who is very curious about our faith and who wants to ask, by all means ask in any way that you can project it. And trust me, I'll do my best to think the best of everybody, and I think that's something our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, always encouraged us to do. Even if someone is doing something wrong or saying something wrong, continuously give them excuses so that you can continue to see them in the best of light. So.
Let me ask a question, if I may, to follow up on your "you can ask us anything" line. So I hope I don't phrase this in an insensitive way. It's not intended that way. It's intended actually to give you the opportunity to respond to this, which is, you're certainly aware that out there is the opinion that Islam is inherently violent. Okay? So the best way perhaps for me to ask the question is, what have you found to be the most effective answer or response to that?
That is my favorite question. So when anybody asks me these types of things, like, is it in your holy book? Is it required for you to be violent and to support this type of violence? One of my favorite answers is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, if you kill one individual, it is as if you have killed all of humanity. And if you have saved one individual, it is as if you have saved all of humanity. And this really projects the true teachings of the Prophet, and that is that any life, regardless of that individual, any life is important. Whether they're Christian, whether they're African Americans, regardless of their cultural or religious background, if you kill an innocent life, that is absolutely one of the worst things you can possibly do. And we do believe in a day of judgment. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm guessing, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Christianity, do you guys believe in a day of judgment where everyone will be accounted for their sins? Yes? and this is, I'm not, see, we're all learning. So, I mean, this is definitely something that us as Muslims believe, that in the afterlife, every individual will be accounted for their good deeds and for their bad deeds. And I think that is my best response I can give. And something else I normally push towards, especially when I'm in a conversation with an individual, is to really stress upon the learning about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I'm currently still indulging in understanding every aspect of his life. And if you really study and indulge, you will see that he was approached in the most violent of ways. And yet he still reacted in a peaceful and a calm manner. And that's pretty much my favorite answer.
I just wanted to bring up one point. Sister Sarah, she did a great job in saying that. There was an author, his name is Michael Hart. I don't know if any of you know him. In the late 70s, he wrote a book called The Top 100 Most Influential People in the World in History. And he was a secular historian. He had no bias towards anyone. And the number one person he put was the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And the reasoning for it was that he said not only was he a religious leader, an excellent religious leader, but he was an excellent statesman in what he did. And that says a lot from a person that's not Muslim, saying that and ranking him on top of Jesus, peace be upon him. He's also a prophet for Muslims as well, and ranking him over Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and all these inspirational people, ranking him number one because he wasn't only a great leader spiritually, but also a great statesman. And that should answer a lot of the questions about, is Islam a religion of war? Is it this? He had rules going into the battlefield. You cannot kill a child. You cannot kill a monk from any other religion. You cannot chop down a tree. There's so much that he brought to wars that no one had before. It was inhumane before, and he brought rules to that. So that's why Michael Hart, if you ever want to read the book, it's called Top 100 Most Influential People. It was written in the late 70s. Again, his name is Michael Hart.
Really quickly, and I brought some literature in the back. We're not the Council on American Islamic Relations, we're a civil rights organization. We're not a religious organization, so we don't proselytize. But I brought some literature in the back that tells a little bit about Islam and Muslims, and there's a brochure on women in Islam, Discover Islam, and there's a brochure on jihad, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about the word jihad, and a lot of people think, actually, I get very upset when I see journalists actually calling those people who commit violence and terrorist acts and harm innocent people, and they call those people jihadists. First, that's not a word in Islam, but I mean, you would call somebody a mujahideen, but somebody who's struggled, jihad just means to struggle, and it really means the greater jihad is to struggle to control the inner impulses that we all have as human beings to be imperfect. So whether it's to be angry, to be slothful, to be lazy, to be backbiting, if you can control that and be at peace with the world, that is a kind of jihad. So taking care of an elderly parent, dealing with teenage children, getting your PhD, that is jihad. Building a better society, a more peaceful world, stopping climate change, that is jihad. Killing innocent people, that is not jihad, and that should never be called jihad. And journalists who should know better should not say that that's jihad, because they're actually putting a kind of religious value on something. So this brochure in the back helps dispel a lot of the stereotypes about that. But of course, I believe that people do misinterpret texts to support whatever political machinations they may have, and I think people do sometimes engage in violence and try to sanctify it with religion. I mean, we saw that with the pogroms in Europe against Jews. I think you can go to a text and you can twist it to make it fit what you think, but I think, as Sister Sarah said, no true faith would teach the harming of other people.
Thank you.
My question is for Julia Shearson.
when you were at the podium and you alluded to House Bill 339 when time ran out. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, I'm glad you asked about that because I might have forgotten. And that bill is really about Sharia, which is our religious practices. And of course, there's a lot of misunderstanding about Sharia as well. Sharia is maybe can be equated more to like halakha or Jewish law or even Catholic canon law. Sharia is how we practice our faith, how we live our life, how we take care of our inheritance, the rules for our marriages, marriage and divorce, and it applies really only to Muslims, not to the wider community. But and I brought a brochure about Sharia too because it helps dispel a lot of the myths. But what happened back in 2010 related to this bill is that there's a group of people in this country, some of them are high-level former military and high-level former CIA and some think tanks, pretty much on the very far right. And they have a theory that the 6 to 13 million Muslims, and we don't know quite how many there are in America because our U.S. Census doesn't ask how many, what your religious practice is, so we don't really know the numbers, but let's say there's 7 million Muslims in the United States, and I think that's a low number. There's a theory that these 7 million Muslims want to overthrow the United States Constitution and replace the Constitution with Sharia or Islamic law. Now, some of those same people actually think that Muslims want to take over the entire healthcare system and that Obamacare is part of that plot to have only Muslim doctors. I mean, I kid you not. These are people in high levels, some of them members of Congress. Two organizations I would name would be the American Public Policy Alliance, and some of the supporters on that are James Woolsey, who's a former CIA operative, a couple generals and admirals that had very bigoted views toward the Muslim world, and another think tank called the Center for Security Policy, which is headed by Frank Gaffney. And those groups are going around the country and to state legislatures and saying we need to pass bills against Sharia or against Muslim religious practices. So unfortunately, these bills are passing around the country. And one of the first bills was in Oklahoma, where in 2010, 70% of the people of Oklahoma voted to amend their constitution to say that the Oklahoma Constitution would not permit Sharia law in Oklahoma. Now, this is kind of like the anti-Catholic scare or anti-Jewish scare, and they amended their constitution, and lo and behold, we challenged that, and it went all the way up to the 10th Circuit, and it was ruled unconstitutional because you cannot stigmatize a particular, religious community. Now, so instead of abandoning this, conspiracy theory that Muslims want to take over America, right? And these would be laughable if they're not so dangerous, because the minute you say that this community is a threat and they're going to overthrow the Constitution, it opens them up to charges of sedition. It opens them up to being investigated. It's kind of like that old communist Red Scare type stuff. And this is very much in action in our world. We have to deal with this on a regular basis. So instead of abandoning the anti-Sharia law movement, they now call it anti-foreign law. And so in Ohio now, they've twice introduced a bill, and it was 513. It was defeated in the House Judiciary. They just let the time expire. That was introduced by Matt Lynch, who was from Bainbridge, the House representative from Bainbridge. Well, now the bill's come back, and it's being introduced by Ron Young, who is from Lake County. He probably doesn't know what Sharia is, but it's an anti-foreign law bill, so-called. But we believe it's unconstitutional. And it's been so crazy that, like out in Arizona, where they tried to pass the law, they had to make a lot of carve-outs because it would interrupt commerce, like international commerce, international adoptions, and so they had to make a lot of contortions. Like they said that American Indian tribes would be, not covered by this. So they had to contort themselves in so many ways. And at one point in Arizona, they had actually written the bill such that they were going to have to ban karma because karma is a kind of foreign law. Well, I didn't think you could ban karma. That's the very point of it. It gets you no matter what, right? So it would be laughable if it were not so funny. So this bill, House Bill 339, is in the Ohio House. It doesn't mention Sharia, but it mentions foreign law. Fortunately, I hope the head of the House Judiciary is not going to let it go forward, but it's pretty scary to see this bill in Ohio again.
I was going to say we have time for more questions, but we don't. So, thank you. Some very quick announcements. First of all, we would like more information about 339. That sounds like a very important thing for our congregation to pursue. We have letter signing, card signing that we sent to the governor. With gerrymandering, the only way you can get things done is go to the governor, hopefully. So upstairs, just as one parting comment, we have a senior class that's graduating from the RE program. So they will give their affirmation statements and where they plan to go with life as they leave as adults, young adults. So this is the last forum for the season, and we're trying to come up with new ideas. We have cards over there. If you have ideas, let us know so we can share those with the greater membership that attends here. Anyways, again, one last time, please.